Bleak House by Charles Dickens, Chapter 1. The Fog That Covered Everything. The world was gray, not just any gray, a thick, heavy fog that wrapped itself around the city like a blanket. It clung to rooftops, filled streets, and even seeped into people's homes. This wasn't an ordinary fog. It felt alive, as if it carried secrets too big for anyone to understand. The fog made everything slow and quiet. People walked carefully, afraid of tripping over things they couldn't see. Sounds were muffled like whispers from far away. Even the birds didn't sing much anymore. They seemed confused by the endless grayness. In this foggy city lived a girl named Esther. She was 16 years old, but she didn't know much about her past. When she asked questions about where she came from or who her parents were, the only answer she ever got was, "It doesn't matter." Esther had grown up with a woman named Miss Barbary, who took care of her, or at least that's what everyone said. But Esther didn't feel cared for. Miss Barbary was strict and cold, always telling her what to do and never letting her ask questions. Esther didn't mind being quiet. In fact, she preferred it. She spent most of her time alone, reading books or looking out the window at the fog-covered streets. Sometimes she imagined what the world would look like without the fog. Would the sun shine brightly? Would the sky be blue? Would people smile more? These thoughts made her feel hopeful, but deep down, she knew the fog might never go away. One morning, something unusual happened. A letter arrived at their door. It was sealed with red wax and had fancy handwriting on it. Esther watched as Miss Barbary opened the letter and read it silently. Her face turned pale, and her hands trembled slightly. Esther wanted to ask what the letter said, but she knew better than to interrupt. Instead, she waited quietly, her heart racing with curiosity. Finally, Miss Barbary looked up and said, "You're leaving." "Leaving?" Esther repeated, confused. "Where am I going?" "To a new life," Miss Barbary replied sharply. "Someone has decided to take care of you now. You'll go to live with them." Esther's mind raced. Who could this person be? Why had they suddenly decided to take care of her? And why did Miss Barbary seem so upset about it? She wanted to ask more questions, but Miss Barbary turned away, refusing to say anything else. That night, Esther lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. She couldn't stop thinking about the letter and what it meant. Was this a good thing, or was it something to be afraid of? She didn't know, but one thing was certain. Her life was about to change. The next morning, Esther packed her few belongings into a small bag. She didn't have much, just a few clothes, a book, and a locket her mother had supposedly given her before she died. Esther had never opened the locket because Miss Barbary said it was broken. But now, as she held it in her hand, she wondered if there was something inside it that could tell her about her past. She tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. Frustrated, she put it back in her bag and sighed. When the carriage arrived to take her away, Esther felt a mix of excitement and fear. She climbed inside and sat by the window, watching as the house disappeared behind the fog. For the first time in her life, she was leaving the only home she had ever known. She didn't know where she was going, but she hoped it would be better than the life she had left behind. As the carriage rolled through the foggy streets, Esther stared out the window. The fog made everything blurry, like a dream she couldn't quite remember. She saw shapes moving in the distance, people walking, carriages passing by, and buildings looming like shadows. But nothing was clear. Everything felt uncertain, just like her future. Esther closed her eyes and tried to imagine what her new life might be like. Would the people she was going to live with be kind? Would they let her ask questions about her past? Or would they be like Miss Barbary, keeping secrets and shutting her out? She didn't know, but she hoped for the best. After what felt like hours, The carriage finally stopped. Esther opened her eyes and looked outside. She saw a large house surrounded by tall trees. The house looked old and dark, but it also felt mysterious, like it had stories hidden inside its walls. A man stood at the door, waiting for her. He was tall and kind-looking, with soft eyes and a warm smile. "Welcome, Esther," he said as she stepped out of the carriage. "We've been expecting you." Esther nodded nervously. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching her bag tightly. The man introduced himself as Mr. Jarndyce. He led her inside the house, which smelled of wood and books. Sunlight streamed through the windows, cutting through the gloom outside. There were two other people waiting for her, a boy named Richard and a girl named Ada. Both were close to her age, and they smiled nervously as Mr. Jarndyce introduced them. "This is your new family," he said. "For now, at least." Richard and Ada seemed nice enough, but Esther couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. Over dinner, Mr. Jarndyce explained why they were all here. "You three are connected by a long court case called Jarndyce and Jarndyce. It's about money and inheritance, but no one knows when it will end. Years have passed, and the case drags on." Esther didn't fully understand what he meant, but she nodded politely. Later that night, lying in bed, she thought about the fog outside. Was it connected to the court case somehow? Or was it just a coincidence? The next few days were strange. Esther settled into her new routine, helping take care of Ada, who was sweet but often worried about the future. Richard, on the other hand, dreamed of winning the court case and using the money to make his dreams come true. Mr. Jarndyce treated them all like family, but he rarely spoke about the case himself. Instead, he encouraged them to focus on simpler things: gardening, reading, and enjoying each other's company. But the fog never lifted. Not completely. One day, while walking through the city, Esther met a strange man named Mr. Tulkinghorn. He was a lawyer, dressed in black from head to toe, and his eyes seemed to see everything. "Miss Esther," he said, "you should know that some secrets cannot stay buried forever." Esther shivered. "What do you mean?" she asked. Mr. Tulkinghorn smiled faintly. "Just remember, you may learn things about yourself that surprise you." That night, Esther couldn't sleep. What did Mr. Tulkinghorn mean? Did he know something about her past? She wanted to ask Mr. Jarndyce, but she didn't want to seem ungrateful. After all, he had given her a home when no one else would. Meanwhile, Richard grew restless. He spent hours talking to lawyers and reading documents about the case. Ada tried to calm him down, but nothing worked. "I need to win this case," Richard said stubbornly. "It's my chance to prove myself." Esther watched as Richard's obsession began to consume him. She wished she could help, but she didn't know how. One rainy afternoon, Esther received another letter. This time it was from Miss Barbary, who had recently passed away. The letter contained two shocking pieces of information. First, Esther's mother was still alive. Second, she was involved in the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case. Esther's hands trembled as she read the words. Her mother, who she had always believed was dead, was alive. And worse, she might be part of the tangled mess that was ruining so many lives. Determined to find answers, Esther traveled to London. She visited a rundown neighborhood where her mother supposedly lived. There, she met a woman named Lady Dedlock. At first glance, Lady Dedlock seemed cold and distant, but as they spoke, Esther noticed sadness in her eyes. Could this really be her mother? Before Esther could ask directly, Lady Dedlock dismissed her. "You must leave," she said firmly. "It's better if we don't meet again." Confused and hurt, Esther returned to the house. She didn't tell anyone what she had learned, not even Mr. Jarndyce, but the weight of the secret pressed heavily on her heart. Around the same time, tragedy struck. Mr. Tulkinghorn was found dead, shot in his office. Everyone suspected foul play, and rumors spread quickly. Had someone silenced him because he knew too much about the case, or about Esther's family? Chapter 2. Secrets begin to unfold. The news of Mr. Tulkinghorn's death spread quickly through the foggy city. People whispered about it in hushed tones, their faces pale with fear. No one knew who had killed him or why, but everyone agreed that it was tied to the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case. The case had dragged on for years, sucking up money and ruining lives. Now it seemed the case had claimed another victim. Esther felt uneasy. She couldn't stop thinking about what Mr. Tulkinghorn had said to her before he died. You may learn things about yourself that surprise you. What did he mean? Was he talking about her mother? Or was there something else she didn't know? Every time she tried to push the thought away, it came back stronger, like a shadow she couldn't escape. At the house, life went on as usual, or at least it seemed that way on the surface. Richard spent most of his time reading documents and talking to lawyers about the case. He was obsessed with winning, convinced that the inheritance would solve all his problems. Ada tried to calm him down, but nothing worked. It's my chance to prove myself, Richard said stubbornly. I can't give up now. Esther watched as Richard's obsession consumed him. She wanted to help, but she didn't know how. Instead, she focused on taking care of Ada, who often cried herself to sleep at night. I'm scared, Ada admitted, one evening. What if we never get out of this mess? Esther hugged her tightly. We'll figure it out, she promised. Together. But even as she comforted Ada, Esther couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was happening, something she didn't fully understand yet. She decided to investigate on her own, hoping to find answers. One morning, Esther went to London. She walked through the foggy streets, clutching her bag tightly. Her heart raced as she approached the rundown neighborhood where Lady Dedlock lived. She wasn't sure what she would say or do, but she knew she had to try. She needed to know the truth about her mother and about herself. When she arrived, Lady Dedlock's house looked darker than ever. It was surrounded by tall iron gates, and the windows were covered with heavy curtains. Esther hesitated for a moment, then knocked on the door. A servant answered and led her inside. Lady Dedlock was sitting by the fire, her face pale and tired. When she saw Esther, her eyes widened slightly, but she didn't say anything. Esther took a deep breath and began to speak. I know who you are, she said softly. You're my mother. Lady Dedlock froze. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but then her expression hardened. You shouldn't have come here, she said coldly. It's dangerous. Why? Esther asked. What's going on? Lady Dedlock shook her head. There are things you don't understand, things I can't explain. You need to leave, now. But I want to know the truth, Esther insisted. Who am I? Why did you leave me? Lady Dedlock stood up and turned away. I did it to protect you, she said quietly. But now I'm not sure if I made the right choice. Before Esther could ask more questions, Lady Dedlock dismissed her. Go home, she said firmly, and don't come back. Confused and hurt, Esther left the house. She walked through the foggy streets, tears streaming down her face. She had come so close to finding answers, but instead, she felt more lost than ever. Who was Lady Dedlock? Why had she abandoned her? And what did it have to do with the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case? When Esther returned to the house, she didn't tell anyone what had happened, not even Mr. Jarndyce. She didn't want to burden them with her problems. Instead, she kept the secret locked inside her heart, like the locket she still hadn't been able to open. Over the next few days, Esther tried to focus on helping Ada and Richard, but the weight of the secret pressed heavily on her. She couldn't. Sleep at night and during the day, she felt distracted and distant. Finally, one evening, she decided to talk to Mr. Jarndyce. "Can I speak with you?" she asked nervously. "Of course," Mr. Jarndyce replied kindly. "What's on your mind?" Esther took a deep breath and began to tell him everything. The letter from Miss Barbary, her trip to London, and her meeting with Lady Dedlock. As she spoke, she realized how much she had been holding back. Tears streamed down her face, but she didn't stop until she had told him everything. To her surprise, Mr. Jarndyce didn't judge her. Instead, he listened carefully, nodding occasionally. When she finished, he said gently, "Esther, we all carry burdens. What matters is how we face them." "What should I do?" Esther asked. "We'll figure it out together," Mr. Jarndyce promised. "But for now, you need to be careful. This case has already ruined too many lives. We don't want it to hurt you too." Esther nodded, feeling a small sense of relief. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least she wasn't alone anymore. The next day, Esther decided to visit Mr. Tulkinghorn's office. She wanted to see if there were any clues about his death, or about her mother. The office was dark and dusty, filled with piles of papers and books. Esther searched carefully, looking for anything unusual. Finally, she found a small notebook hidden under a stack of documents. As she flipped through the pages, her heart raced. The notebook contained notes about the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case, but it also mentioned Lady Dedlock. There were details about her past, including references to a child she had given up long ago. Esther realized with a shock that the child was her. She read the notes over and over, trying to make sense of them. It seemed that Lady Dedlock had been involved in the case from the beginning. Her family's money was part of the inheritance, and her secrets were tied to the tangled mess that had ruined so many lives. But why had she kept Esther hidden? And what role did Mr. Tulkinghorn play in all of this? Esther decided to take the notebook back to the house. She showed it to Mr. Jarndyce, who read it carefully. "This changes things," he said gravely. "Lady Dedlock is in danger. If someone finds out about her past, they might hurt her, or you." "What should we do?" Esther asked. "We need to protect her," Mr. Jarndyce replied. "And we need to end this case once and for all." Esther nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it, for herself, for her mother, and for everyone caught up in the mess. Meanwhile, Richard grew more restless. He spent hours poring over documents, trying to find a way to win the case. Ada tried to calm him down, but nothing worked. "I need to prove myself," Richard said stubbornly. "I can't give up now." Esther watched as Richard's obsession consumed him. She wished she could help, but she didn't know how. Instead, she focused on supporting Ada, who often cried herself to sleep at night. "We'll figure it out," Esther promised. "Together." One evening, Esther went for a walk in the garden. The fog had lifted slightly, revealing patches of blue sky. She sat on a bench and looked up at the stars, feeling a small sense of peace. Despite everything, she knew she wasn't alone. She had Ada, Richard, and Mr. Jarndyce, and she had hope, a fragile, flickering light in the darkness. As she sat there, she thought about her mother. Was Lady Dedlock really trying to protect her, or was she hiding something else? Esther didn't know, but she was determined to find out. She owed it to herself and to everyone else caught up in the case. The next morning, Esther woke up early. She packed a small bag and left the house quietly. She was going back to London to confront Lady Dedlock and uncover the truth. She didn't know what awaited her, but she knew she couldn't turn back. Chapter 3. Discovering the Truth. Esther woke up early, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and determination. She packed a small bag with just enough clothes and food, for a short trip. She didn't tell anyone where she was going, not Ada, not Richard, and not even Mr. Jarndyce. She knew they would try to stop her, and she couldn't let that happen. This was something she had to do alone. The fog was still thick as she stepped outside, but Esther felt a strange sense of clarity. She had spent so long feeling lost and confused, but now she had a purpose. She was going back to London to confront Lady Dedlock and uncover the truth about her past. She didn't know what awaited her, but she knew she couldn't turn back. As the carriage rolled through the foggy streets, Esther stared out the window. The city looked darker than ever, like it was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She thought about everything that had led her here: the letter from Miss Barbary, the meeting with Lady Dedlock, and the notebook she had found in Mr. Tulkinghorn's office. Each piece of the puzzle had brought her closer to the truth, but there were still so many unanswered questions. When the carriage finally stopped, Esther stepped out and looked around. The rundown neighborhood where Lady Dedlock lived seemed even gloomier than before. The tall iron gates loomed over her, and the windows of the house were covered with heavy curtains. Esther hesitated for a moment, then walked up to the door and knocked. A servant answered and led her inside. Lady Dedlock was sitting by the fire just like last time. When she saw Esther, her face turned pale and she stood up quickly. "What are you doing here?" she asked sharply. "I told you not to come back." "I need answers," Esther replied firmly. "You're my mother. Why did you leave me? What's your connection to the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case?" Lady Dedlock sighed and sat back down. For a moment, she looked like she might cry, but then her expression hardened again. "It's complicated," she said quietly. "I didn't want to get into this mess, but I had no choice." "What mess?" Esther asked. "Tell me the truth." Lady Dedlock hesitated, then began to speak. "Years ago, I made a mistake, a big one. I fell in love with someone I shouldn't have. We had a child. You. But when my family found out, they forced me to give you up. They said it was the only way to protect our reputation." Esther listened carefully, her heart racing. "So you gave me away? Just like that?" "It wasn't easy," Lady Dedlock admitted, "but I thought it was the best thing for you. I wanted you to have a better life than I could give you. My family, they're not kind people. They care only about money and power." "And the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case?" Esther asked. "What does it have to do with you?" Lady Dedlock sighed again. "My family's money is part of the inheritance. That's why the case has dragged on for so long. Everyone wants a piece of it, but no one knows how much is left. Most of it has been spent on legal fees." Esther felt a wave of anger and sadness wash over her. So all this time, people have been fighting over money while lives are ruined? And you've been hiding because of it? "Yes," Lady Dedlock replied softly. "I didn't want to get involved, but Mr. Tulkinghorn found out. He was blackmailing me, threatening to expose my secret if I didn't cooperate." "Is that why he was killed?" Esther asked. Lady Dedlock shook her head. "I don't know. But whoever did it must have been trying to protect their own secrets. Or mine." Esther sat quietly, trying to process everything she had heard. Her mother had given her up to protect her, but in doing so, she had also kept her hidden from the world. Now, Lady Dedlock was trapped in a web of lies and danger, just like everyone else caught up in the case. "What happens now?" Esther asked finally. "I don't know," Lady Dedlock admitted. "But you need to leave. Now. It's too dangerous for you here." "No," Esther said firmly. "I'm not leaving until we figure this out. Together." Lady Dedlock looked at her with surprise. "You're brave," she said softly. "Braver than I ever was." Esther hugged her tightly, feeling a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and relief. She had spent so long wondering who she was and where she came from. Now she finally had some answers, but she knew the fight wasn't over yet. The next day, Esther and Lady Dedlock went to see Mr. Jarndyce. They told him everything about Lady Dedlock's past, her connection to the case, and the danger they were both in. Mr. Jarndyce listened carefully, his face serious. "This changes things," he said gravely. "We need to end this case once and for all." "How?" Esther asked. "We'll go to court," Mr. Jarndyce replied. "We'll present all the evidence we have, including the notebook you found, and demand a resolution. It's risky, but it's the only way." Esther nodded, feeling a mix of fear and determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it, for herself, for her mother, and for everyone caught up in the mess. Over the next few days, Esther worked tirelessly to prepare for the trial. She gathered documents, organized notes, and practiced her testimony. She wanted to make sure she was ready for anything. Meanwhile, Lady Dedlock stayed hidden, afraid that someone might find her and hurt her, or Esther. Finally, the day of the trial arrived. Esther walked into the courtroom, her heart racing. The room was filled with people, lawyers, judges, and spectators, all waiting to see what would happen. Esther took a deep breath and stepped forward. She began to speak, telling the court everything she had learned. She talked about Lady Dedlock, the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case, and the secrets that had ruined so many lives. As she spoke, she felt a strange sense of peace. She wasn't just speaking for herself. She was speaking for everyone who had suffered because of the case. When she finished, the courtroom was silent. The judge looked at her carefully, then at the evidence she had presented. Finally, he spoke. "This case has gone on for far too long," he said gravely. "It's time to bring it to an end." The judge ruled that the remaining money should be divided equally among the claimants. It wasn't much. Most of it had already been spent on legal fees, but it was enough to give everyone a fresh start. More importantly, the secrets that had haunted them for years were finally out in the open. After the trial, Esther went back to the house. Ada and Richard were waiting for her, their faces filled with relief and joy. "You did it!" Ada exclaimed, hugging her tightly. Richard nodded. "I'm sorry for being so obsessed with the case," he said. "I realize now that it wasn't worth it." Esther smiled. "It's okay. We've all learned something from this." Later that evening, Esther went for a walk in the garden. The fog had lifted completely, revealing a clear blue sky. She sat on a bench and looked up at the stars, feeling a deep sense of peace. Despite everything, she knew she wasn't alone. She had Ada, Richard, Mr. Jarndyce, and now her mother. And she had hope, a fragile, flickering light in the darkness. As she sat there, she thought about the future. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew she was ready to face it. With kindness, courage, and determination, she could overcome anything. Chapter 4. Finding Hope. The trial was over, but the effects of it lingered like the last wisps of fog in the air. Esther felt a strange mix of emotions, relief that the case had finally ended, sadness for all the lives it had ruined, and determination to move forward. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew she wasn't alone. Ada, Richard, Mr. Jarndyce, and even Lady Dedlock were by her side, each carrying their own burdens but united in hope. After the trial, Esther returned to the house with Ada and Richard. They sat together in the living room, talking about what had happened. "It's strange," Richard said quietly. "I spent so long chasing that money, thinking it would solve all my problems. But now that it's gone, I feel lighter." Ada nodded. "Me too. It's like a weight has been lifted." Esther smiled. "We've all learned something from this. Maybe that's the real victory, not the money, but the lessons we've taken away." Mr. Jarndyce joined them, his face calm but thoughtful. "The Jarndyce and Jarndyce case was never about the money," he said. "It was about people, about greed, fear, and secrets. Now that it's over, we can focus on rebuilding our lives." Esther nodded, feeling a small sense of peace. She knew the scars of the case would never fully heal, but at least they could start again, with honesty, kindness, and hope. The next day, Esther decided to visit Lady Dedlock. She hadn't seen her mother since the trial, and she wanted to make sure she was safe. When she arrived at the rundown neighborhood, the house looked quieter than before. The tall iron gates were still there, but the curtains were drawn back, letting sunlight stream through the windows. Lady Dedlock greeted her warmly, her face softer now that the secrets were out in the open. "Thank you for everything," she said, hugging Esther tightly. "You've given me a second chance?" Esther smiled. "We've both been given a second chance. Let's make the most of it." Over the next few weeks, Esther and Lady Dedlock began to rebuild their relationship. They spent hours talking, sharing stories, and laughing. Esther learned more about her mother's past, the mistakes she had made, the sacrifices she had endured, and the love she had always carried for her daughter. For the first time in her life, Esther felt like she truly belonged. Meanwhile, life at the house began to change. With the case finally over, everyone started to focus on simpler things: gardening, reading, and enjoying each other's company. Ada and Richard grew closer, their bond stronger than ever. Richard stopped dreaming about money and instead focused on finding a job that would allow him to support himself and Ada. Ada, in turn, helped Esther take care of the house and garden, creating a warm and welcoming home for everyone. One morning, as Esther watered the flowers in the garden, she noticed something unusual: a small bird sitting on the fence. Its wing was bent, and it looked frightened. Esther put down her watering can and approached it slowly. "Don't worry," she whispered. "I'll help you." She picked up the bird gently and took it inside. She made a small nest for it using leaves and soft cloth, then fed it crumbs of bread and gave it water. Every day she cared for the bird, watching as it grew stronger. After a week, it flapped its wings and flew away. Esther watched it disappear into the sky, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Helping the bird reminded her of how far she had come, from a girl lost in the fog to someone who could make a difference, no matter how small. As the days passed, Esther realized that helping others gave her a sense of purpose. She decided to open a small school for children in need. Many families in the city struggled to survive, and their children often went without education. Esther wanted to change that. With Mr. Jarndyce's support, she found an old building near the house and turned it into a classroom. She filled it with books, paper, and pencils, and invited children from the neighborhood to come and learn. At first, only a few children showed up, shy and unsure of what to expect, but Esther welcomed them warmly, teaching them to read, write, and count. She also told them stories about kindness, courage, and hope. Slowly, more children began to come, and soon the classroom was full of laughter and learning. Esther felt proud of what she had created, a place where children could dream big and believe in themselves. One evening, as Esther sat in the garden, she thought about how much had changed. The fog that had once covered the city seemed to have lifted completely, revealing a world full of possibilities. She thought about Lady Dedlock, who had given her a second chance at being a mother. She thought about Ada and Richard, who had found love and strength in each other. And she thought about herself, who had discovered her own courage and purpose. But Esther also knew that challenges still lay ahead. The world was not perfect, and neither was she. There would be hard times, moments of doubt, and struggles to overcome. But she also knew that she could face them, as long as she had hope. The next morning, Esther woke up early. She walked to the top of a nearby hill, where she could see the entire city spread out below her. The sun was rising, painting the sky, in shades of orange and pink. The air smelled fresh, and the streets were quiet. For a moment, Esther felt like she could see the future clearly, a future full of light, even if there were still shadows. As she stood there, she thought about the notebook she had found in Mr. Tulkinghorn's office. It had been the key to uncovering the truth, but it had also been a reminder of how dangerous secrets could be. Esther realized that while the case was over, the lessons it had taught her would stay with her forever. She vowed to live her life with honesty, kindness, and courage, to be someone who brought light into the darkness. When she returned to the house, Ada and Richard were waiting for her. They had prepared breakfast, and the table was filled with fresh bread, fruit, and tea. "We wanted to thank you," Ada said, smiling, "for everything you've done, for us, for the children, and for yourself." Esther felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she replied softly, "for being here with me." Later that afternoon, Lady Dedlock visited the house. She brought a small gift, a locket, the same one Esther had tried to open years ago. "I fixed it," Lady Dedlock explained. "Open it." Esther held the locket in her hand, her heart racing. She opened it carefully, revealing a tiny picture inside. It was a portrait of her mother, young, smiling, and full of hope. Esther stared at it, feeling a wave of emotions wash over her. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging Lady Dedlock tightly. That evening, as Esther lay in bed, she thought about everything that had happened. She had faced secrets, dangers, and challenges. But she had also found family, purpose, and hope. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready to face it. With kindness, courage, and determination, she could overcome anything. Chapter 5. A New Beginning. The sun rose early over the city, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. Esther stood on the hill, looking out at the world below. The fog that had once covered everything was gone, replaced by clear skies and fresh air. It felt like a new day, not just for her, but for everyone who had been touched by the Jarndyce and Jarndyce case. The trial had ended, the secrets were out, and now it was time to move forward. Esther took a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't known before. She thought about how far she had come, from a girl lost in the fog to someone who could make a difference. She had faced her past, uncovered the truth, and found hope in the people around her. Now she was ready to start again, with honesty, kindness, and courage. When Esther returned to the house, Ada and Richard were waiting for her. They had packed a picnic basket and invited her to join them in the garden. "We thought it would be nice to celebrate," Ada said, smiling. "A new beginning." Esther nodded, feeling grateful for their friendship. Together they spread a blanket under a tree and unpacked the food: fresh bread, cheese, fruit, and tea. As they ate, they talked about the future. Richard had found a job as a teacher, helping children learn to read and write. Ada planned to help Esther with the school, teaching art and music to the students. Both of them seemed happier than ever, their bond stronger than before. "You've changed so much," Ada said to Esther. "You're braver than I ever imagined." "I'm not brave," Esther replied softly. "I'm just trying to do what's right." "That's what makes you brave," Richard added. "You've faced things most people would run from, and you've come out stronger." Esther smiled, feeling a warmth in her heart. She knew she wasn't alone anymore. Ada, Richard, Mr. Jarndyce, and Lady Dedlock were all part of her family. Now, a family built on love, trust, and hope. Later that afternoon, Esther went to visit Lady Dedlock. Her mother had moved into a small cottage near the house, where she spent her days gardening and reading. When Esther arrived, Lady Dedlock greeted her warmly, her face glowing with happiness. "I never thought I'd have this," she said, hugging Esther tightly. A second chance, to be your mother, to live without fear. Esther felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you for being here," she whispered. "For telling me the truth." Lady Dedlock nodded. "It wasn't easy, but it was worth it. You've given me hope, Esther. You've shown me that it's never too late to start again." As they sat together in the garden, Esther realized how much her mother had changed. The cold, distant woman she had first met was gone, replaced by someone warm and kind. They talked for hours, sharing stories, and laughing like they had always been together. For the first time in her life, Esther felt like she truly belonged. The next day, Esther returned to the school. The children were waiting for her, their faces bright with excitement. She greeted them warmly, then began the lesson. Today, she decided to teach them about hope. "Hope is like a light in the darkness," she explained. "It helps us keep going, even when things are hard." The children listened carefully, nodding as they understood. One little girl raised her hand. "What if the light goes out?" she asked. "Then we find another one," Esther replied. "There's always light somewhere, if we look for it." The children smiled, their eyes filled with wonder. Esther felt proud of them and of herself. She had created a place where children could dream big and believe in themselves. And she knew that every child who walked through the door carried a spark of hope that could light up the world. Over the next few weeks, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Esther spent her days teaching at the school, caring for the children, and spending time with her family. Ada and Richard helped her whenever they could, bringing laughter and joy to the house. Lady Dedlock visited often, sharing stories and advice. Even Mr. Jarndyce joined them sometimes, his calm presence a reminder of how far they had all come. One evening, as Esther sat in the garden, she thought about the locket her mother had given her. She opened it carefully, revealing the tiny portrait inside. It was a reminder of where she had come from, and of the love that had always been there, even when she didn't know it. Esther held the locket close to her heart, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. The next morning, Esther woke up early. She climbed to the top of the hill, where she could see the entire city spread out below her. The sun was rising, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The streets were quiet, and the air smelled fresh. For a moment, Esther felt like she could see the future clearly, a future full of light, love, and hope. As she stood there, she thought about everything she had learned. Life was both beautiful and hard, but it was also full of possibilities. The fog that had once covered the city was gone, but its lessons remained. Secrets could destroy lives, but honesty could heal them. Greed could ruin families, but kindness could bring them back together. And even in the darkest times, hope could shine through. Esther realized that her journey wasn't just about finding answers. It was about becoming someone who could make a difference. She had faced her fears, uncovered the truth, and found her purpose. Now she was ready to share that purpose with the world, to teach others about kindness, courage, and hope. When she returned to the house, Ada and Richard were waiting for her. They had prepared breakfast, and the table was filled with fresh bread, fruit, and tea. "We wanted to thank you," Ada said, smiling, "for everything you've done, for us, for the children, and for yourself." Esther felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she replied softly, "for being here with me." Later that afternoon, Lady Dedlock visited the house. She brought a small gift, a book filled with stories about kindness, courage, and hope. "This is for you," she said, handing it to Esther, "to remind you of how far you've come and of how much you can achieve." Esther hugged her mother tightly, feeling a wave of emotions wash over her. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." That evening, as Esther lay in bed, she thought about the future. She didn't know what lay ahead, but she knew she was ready to face it. With kindness, courage, and determination, she could overcome anything. And she knew she wasn't alone. Ada, Richard, Lady Dedlock, Mr. Jarndyce, and the children were. All part of her family now, a family built on love, trust, and hope. As she drifted off to sleep, Esther smiled. The fog had lifted, and the world was full of possibilities. She had faced her past, uncovered the truth, and found her purpose. Now, she was ready to start again, with a new beginning, a new hope, and a new life. The end. This concludes the story of Esther and her journey through the fog of secrets, struggles, and hope. It teaches us that even in the darkest times, light can shine through, if only we are brave enough to look for it. Esther's story reminds us that kindness, courage, and honesty can heal wounds, rebuild lives, and create a brighter future for everyone.